An Untraveled Road by Neon Zangetsu, Chapter 23. Burn them all. See, that's the thing about fire, and tend to it properly, keep a watchful eye on it, and it's fine, but give it too much fuel, take your eyes off it, leave it untended, and, well, guess you could say I speak from experience on that. Oi, don't be giving me that look, Neil. How was I supposed to know what would happen? Torchwick, future, burn them all. Eureka, I've done it. Arthur Watts cackled and flung both hands into the air like he just didn't care. He did care, of course. He cared a great deal about his work, which was precisely the point, you see. He'd just put the finishing touches on his latest creation, finally ironed out the last of the kinks in the armor, eliminated any and all misfires from the gauntlets, fixed the blasted HUD when the helmet came down, all of it, every bit of it, every variable now lay accounted for. All that remained was a proper field test, and if events on Menagerie went as he suspected, he'd be getting that momentarily. Humming softly to himself, he brushed two fingers against the side of his head and focused. Sure enough, the nanochip within pulsed, interpreting his commands. Not a heartbeat later, a red gold gauntlet rocketed off the table and sheathed itself over his right palm. For a moment, he worried it wouldn't take, but no, it reacted seamlessly, flowing up his shoulders to stop just short of his wrist. The repulsor in the center of the gauntlet pulsed softly, then closed as he made a fist. Flexing his fingers caused it to open again with a soft, keening whine, ready to be fired at a moment's notice. Perfect, he hummed to himself. He'd only come this far because the Schnee, Naruto, he recognized his greatness. As for the rest of the world, they would see. Soon, everyone would see. Are you quite done over there? Pietro's words were a rusty hook in the lab, plucking him from his merry musings. You've been grinning for the better part of 30 seconds now, and quite unbecoming, I must say. Foppish fool, he wouldn't rise to the man's bait. Pass me that circuit board. Paladina quirked a bushy brow. You didn't say please. Must not kill. Nestled away in the Schnee craft, they'd both been hard at work preparing their latest surprises for the madmen manning the island, and just as well they were. Arthur strongly suspected they'd need every advantage they could muster for the fight to come. This vessel was well armored, but it lacked weapons. It would take a concentrated effort to break in, yet a determined party could if they saw it. None had been foolish enough to try, meaning they still had time, however slim it might be. He was certain such an assault would come once negotiations inevitably went south. From what he'd last seen on that television, they were going south fast. Watts would be the first to admit he'd never been the fighting sort. A marksman he was, but a brawler? No, Pietro even less so. Their minds were their weapons, their wits a sharper tool than any blade. With their combined intellect, they could be unstoppable. If only the man wasn't so bloody aggravating. There, I finished. Pietro pivoted in his chair, eyes agleam. What do you think? She's not quite complete, and I had to rush a bit, but what's considered a masterpiece before him, the finely inlaid circuits, the thrusters, built-in weaponry, this marvel of engineering. For once, he didn't demean his rival work. It mustn't say that bit aloud, lest he provoke Pietro. Was well made. Not complete, not quite, but time fixed all flaws. That, and a great deal of testing, but they had precious little of both at the moment. Quite nicely done, he admitted begrudgingly. I still say my arm exceeds her by a country mile. Pah! Pietro waved him aside. Enough squabbling. You gave me your word. I helped you with your work. Now you help me with mine. Blast it all. Watts blew out a sigh. He hadn't he? Oh, very well. I suppose we have the time. So long as our illustrious host is keeping the rabble entertained. Pietro snatched up a remote and aimed it at a nearby wall-mounted television, one that had miraculously remained muted until this very moment. See for yourself. Watts flicked a glance at a nearby screen. Blanched. In it, the patron tilted his head, whiskered cheeks dimpling in a grin as he stood before the mountain bodies. Had enough, Coldgrim? I can do this all day. Intermission! The aforementioned man all but howled down at him, frothing in his fury. I demand an intermission! Stop slaying my followers! Masked men hustled the blonde away, but that smile didn't fade. Not once. The two geniuses exchanged a long, lingering look. Well, he certainly lives up to his end of the bargain. Perhaps we should hurry. Pietro winced. Yes, let's. Time waits for no man. Watts reached down, fumbling in his belt for a handheld radio, clicked it once, and held it to his ear. Alma, dear, are you in position? Affirmative, father. A happy chirp answered him. I've disarmed one of the bombs. Another click followed, punctuated by an awful crack. Oh, I just found another. Excellent. His mustache lifted in a smug smile. Disarm it quickly now. We're on a time crunch. Understood. Is Penny ready? That was Pietro's turn to smile. Don't you worry, child. Won't be long now. A short, sharp scream came from the mic. It didn't belong to Alma. Watts preened nonetheless. She may not be his flesh and blood in the technical sense, but he was still proud of his child. Nothing could stop her once she got going. He pitied the fool who tried. Get back here, you! A hand clamped down on Alma's shoulder. She tilted her head just so. You're being rude, sir. Please release me. Hell no! The masked faunus growled at her. You're going to pay for what you did to our boys. Her tucker evaporated into a fine, bloody mist. She looked down, blinked. Oh dear, my dress is ruined. No matter, Penny would be finished soon, and all the better. She couldn't wait to be a big sister. You're a mess. Naruto took the remark in good grace as Willow applied a clean cloth to his cheek. Ow, that stings. Willow tuttered. It wouldn't if you just sat still. Therein lied the problem. He really couldn't. Colgrim had been throwing followers at him for the better part of a day now. He had his limits, and while he was nowhere near them just yet, he was beginning to get a bit sore. That last bastard had tried to do him in with a poisonous blade, and poison hadn't worked on him for ages, but it still stung like hell and made healing difficult. Don't whine, scars built character. Best I saved my chakra for real wounds. In truth, he was always grateful he was almost grateful the Colgrim prick had finally called an intermission. It gave him a chance to rest. Even if the bastard used to prepare more troops and tricks and traps to throw at him, didn't matter. He had reaped a bloody toll sooner or later. He'd run out of followers, but so long as he was distracted, that benefited him. And time Colgrin spent fixating on him was time Watts and Pietro could use to locate the bombs, maybe even disarm them completely. Even if he didn't like the idea of exposing Cinder, Sienna, and Roman to all this violence. Darling, Willow's voice tugged him back to reality. Look at me. Naruto did. You can do this. She cupped his cheek with one hand, letting him lean into it with a weary sigh now as she held him. I know you can. Don't worry about the girls. Cinder and Sienna adore you. You can do no wrong far as they're concerned. If I'm the standard they measure people to, I fear for their future husbands. His words drew a light laugh from her. Don't fret about the future. She took his hand and guided it down to her belly. Focus on the here and now. Give our children a safe world to grow up in. That much I can do. He could have sworn he felt a kick just now, but he kept it to himself. You do realize winter's gonna be spoiled rotten. Her lips quirked in a faint smile. Wise and Whitley too. Already in a hurry to have more. Don't be crude. She tweaked his arm, drawing a smirk from him. I always wanted a large family. It faded when he caught the faint hitch in her voice. After what happened to Mother and my sister. She took a small, shuddering breath and looked away, shaking her head. Father never had the heart to try again. I didn't dare ask him to. It feels like I'm making up for the lost time. He took hold of her face and steered her back to him. I'm sorry. Don't be. Her smile returned tenfold, warm as sunshine. Mother would have liked you, I think. The two of you would have gotten along famously. A thorn of regret tugged at his heart. Dimly he recalled the picture Nicholas had once shown him. What was her name? Willow, come on. I want to know about your life and those in it, dead or otherwise. Wanda, she said at last. Her name was Wanda. And your sister? That would be my Winter. A rare giggle burst from her lips. She would have cussed you out once or twice, but you would have grown on her eventually. Winter, spelled with a Y. Realization broke like the dawn when she nodded. That's why you were so keen on Winter for a name. I was. Her voice was small, tiny even. Please don't think less of me. I don't. It's just. She tilted her head, a strand of white hair falling over one eye. I'm sorry, but I gotta ask. He couldn't help himself any longer. Why do all the women in your family have names that start with the letter W? A suffocating silence reigned between them. This time, Willow was the one to break it with a peal of laughter. Of all the things, that's what concerns you. Well, yeah. He scratched the back of his head, hiding a rueful chuckle of his own behind a palm. Don't get me wrong, Winter, Weiss, and Whitley are great names, but there comes a point when we run out of good ones, you know? What then? I mean, he counted off on one thing on his fingers. We've already got Cinder, Sienna, and now Roman, running out of names here. I know that look. Her eyes snapped to his. You're thinking of adopting that boy. Naruto found himself opening his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Maybe. Joy of joys. We've picked up another stray. Good. Willow smiled, both relieved and alarmed him all at once. That poor boy needs some proper guidance in his life. Good role models. Someone to keep him on the proper path. A blonde brow rose. Since when are we good role models? We kill people all the time. Ah! She bobbed his nose with a finger. We kill bad people, beloved. There's a difference. We can draw up papers when we get back. You're just going to ignore that murder bit, aren't you? Indeed, I am most magnanimous. Cheeky Schnee. Still, she'd said when, not if. He liked the sound of that. Made things feel more solid, real somehow. A beat of comfortable silence passed between the two of them, broken only by the occasional noise from the stands above. For a few wonderful minutes, it was only the two of them. Naruto broke it with a wistful sigh. What do you think she'll be like? Winter, I mean. Willow huffed into his shoulder. I wish I knew. He grinned. Bet you'll look just like you. No bet, she tuttered. Maybe you shall have my eyes. Oh, her own sight hits, glimmering with a faint assure, made in fire as her emotions slipped her leash. Not hoping for a blonde, are we? Nah, he waved her words aside. Besides, I heard Schnee genes are pretty damn strong. Your old man told me all about them. Of course he did. She made a grumbling sound. I'm going to be terribly cross with him when we get home. Don't be. He's as excited to be a grandfather as you are a mother. He'd hit her face. You don't have to remind me. I kinda do. He couldn't quite keep the smile from his face. Something sparked in his eyes. She grabbed at his sleeve, tugging him back to her. Their lips met. Her kiss was desperate, frantic even, driven not by lust, but a singular need to express herself where words could not. Her arms draped around his neck, pulling him close. He inhaled sharply and returned her feelings with vigor, looping his good arm around her waist to hold her tighter. Had this been anything other than a public place, clothes would have been shed, and several other loud noises besides. As it stood, they did little more than hold one another. You come back to me, you hear? She drew away, forehead touching his. You go out there and win, find the one responsible for this, and tear them apart. Hey, he held her close. I'm not going anywhere. Neither are you. Still, be safe. Come back to me. He kissed her forehead. To all of us. A light knock rang out against the door. Sorry to interrupt, lover birds, but you got a minute? Willow tilted her head, considering. I have a knife. Still coming in, Schnee. The wooden frame creaked, and sure enough, Crow poked his head in. He looked like he wanted to comment on their ruffled clothes, but an icy look from Willow quelled him. Just as well, too. He was looking pretty ruffled himself right about now, and for all the wrong reasons. Red eyes flitted to them as he closed the door behind him. Locked it now, for good measure. Any news? Depending on your definition of the word. Crow plonked down on the bench beside him. Watts' kid found a bunch of bombs, disarmed him too. Willow recalls. Alma? Yep, slipped away when we weren't looking. And she grabbed his arm. She's just a child. Meh, Tyrion's with her. When he didn't raise to the bait, her bow forward. Do I want to know? Nope. Naruto wrinkled his nose. I pity your future children if they pick up that word. Remarkably, Crow's face reddened. Oi, not funny. Seriously though, how'd she find them? Crow was all smiles. That little bunny you saved, Meg, she was in on quite a few schemes. She's also got a vengeful streak a mile wide. And kinda kinky, if I'm being honest. Willow hummed. I'd be sure to tell her you said that. His face drained of alcohol. You wouldn't. A pale brow rose. Try me, bird boy. Snappy Schnee. He shook his head, uncorked his flask, and knocked it back to fortify himself. Look, the point is, we're nearly halfway there. When the duo quirked a brow, he offered him his flask. Your pet scientist, must you call Watts that? Has reinforcements from Atlas waiting in the wings. Crow barreled on, undaunted by his scowl. If you can just keep Colgrim and his crazies occupied for a little longer, we might be able to eke out a win here. Without those bombs, they're sitting ducks. Now you gonna drink or not? Ain't really one for drinking. Come on, what's the arm? Not like Willow can. He had a point there. He has a point, dear. A little liquid courage might help you. Fine. He took a long sip, forced himself to swallow, and really choked as it seared his throat. That burns. What is this? Pure alcohol? More or less, came the accompanied cackle. Should it help steady your nerves? Oddly enough, it did. Not by much, but it pushed his worries down, allowing him to focus on happier thoughts. You know, he muttered, I wouldn't say no to a proper tournament someday once we're done with this. Crow scoffed. I'd recommend the upcoming Vital Festival, but neither of you are students, we know. Willow finished patting his bicep. It's a nice thought, dear. Where's it being held again? Crow pinched expression spoke volumes. It's not going to be held in Atlas anytime soon, is it? Only a few years from now, he said. Nothing to worry about. Naruto felt a painful twitch coming on. That is precisely why I'm worried. Right. Credit where it was due. Brownman saw his anger and was quick to switch tactics. Any idea who this goddess of theirs is? I have an inkling. Nope, he said instead. Whoever she is, we need to be prepared if she makes an appearance, or have an escape if things go south. Willow opened. A portal opened behind Crow. Raven poked her head through it, grinning from ear to ear. He didn't miss the blood on her pale cheek. That's where I come in. Worst case scenario, I can cut us a path to the old man. He's still in Vale. I can feel him getting a little twitchy, but I don't think he's gonna be leaving anytime soon. Naruto released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. At least they had a lifeline if this and the island blew up in their faces. Crow couldn't let it be. Of course you'd focus on running away. That's rich coming from you. Raven chuckled at her brother. How's your bunny friend? Didn't you run from her? She sneered when he choked on his own spit. Thought so. But back to the matter at hand. Quick as a flash, her red eye snapped to him and Willow. There's no way that fool's going to let us go, you know? Willow scoffed. Come now, you don't know that. Raven arched a dark brow. Fair enough. All right, Whiskers. She stepped out her portal fully and plunked down on his left side, pinning him between her and Willow. What's the plan? Naruto squinted. Who says I have a plan? Her eyebrow climbed higher still. No words were needed. Fine, fine. He flung up his arms. You got me. First, wanted to check this room for bugs. Already done. Summer swung out of a nearby vent to startle them, covered in dust and grinning despite it all. It's clear. She pivoted and he saw his artificial arm still bound to her back. Good. At least she hadn't lost the damn thing. He'd be wanting it back once this mess was over. Don't know if they're incompetent or just overconfident. How long have you been up there? Long enough. Wait. He held up a hand. Where's Tai Yang? Up top, keeping an eye on the Beldanas and the bunny, came the police chirrup. I'm fine, by the way. One man against an angry crowd. Naruto didn't like those odds. He said as much. Psst. Summer waved him aside. We're practically hunters already. Nobody's gonna mess with us. And if they do, well, her grin grew. Then they better not make Tai angry. You wouldn't like him when he's angry. Besides, I'm pretty sure he sent Cinder and Sienna down here. On cue, the door creaked open. That was the best. Sienna knew this to be true. No two ways about it. He was probably one of, if not the strongest bastard that she'd met in her young life. Alright, maybe she was a bit biased in that regard. Sure, she could be honest about that much. Naruto made a mockery of Menagerie's finest warriors. And with one arm, they barely hurt him. Made her proud. It did, because at the end of the day, for all his talk about peace and shaking hands, the old man could crack skulls with the best of them. Wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty either. Yes, sir. Pops had beaten those bastards before, and he'd do it again. Cinder had been right after all. This was his power unmatched, a fine flowing finesse the likes of which she'd seldom seen before. So why did he look so damn tired, sitting there on the bench? His eyes lit up at the sight of her, and that exhaustion seemed to burn away, if only for a moment. Hey kiddo, come to check up on me. The Brownwind twins rolled their eyes, even as Auntie Summer cooed. Sienna ignored them. Of course she did. Uncle Ty had seen her and Cinder squirming upstairs and sent them on their way. She'd beaten her by only a few steps, and she'd be right behind her any minute now. Ha! Early bird gets the worm. You look like shit. Mom, never thought she'd call a Schnee that, huffed Little. Language? Nyeh. She stuck out her tongue, only to yelp as he yanked her into his arm and rubbed his knuckles against her hair. Dad! She squirmed in his grasp, flushing fiercely. Quit it! Willow dabbed his cheek with a white handkerchief. Must you be so rough? He wagged a blonde brow at her. You didn't complain last time. She flushed and kicked his leg. Not in front of Sienna. Her ears twitched. Dad, I do know what sex is. Not on my watch, you don't. Cinder burst in before she could interject further. She took one look at him, saw the blood on his face, golden eyes narrowed to angry slits. She stalked over, shoes clicking against the floor. The moment she reached him, she hopped up, plunked down into his lap, leaned her head against his chest, and all but latched onto his good arm. Sienna had to stifle a smile. For all her claims of elegance and fire, her half-sister really could be a clingy bitch sometimes. Oi, you're getting too big for this. Screw it, you two could play this game. On guard. Sienna all but leaped onto his free leg with a laugh. My turn. Ah! Dad grunted in good grace as she landed on his knee, but made no move to dislodge her either. Honestly, the both of you. A scroll clicked somewhere behind him, and he cast a baleful glare over his shoulder at the responsible party. Summer, delete that right now. Never! Sienna suspected that if they weren't sitting on his lap, he would have given chase. As it was, his face only reddened when another scroll, Willow's, clicked off a few more pictures. Alright, that's it. Would all of Team Stark kindly scram? His strained smile promised a prank at the later date if they didn't heed his request. I want some time alone with my family before the next bout. Summer wilted. Aw, you heard him, brother. Raven cut a portal and summarily hauled a protesting crow into it. Summer backpedaled, paused, looked like she wanted to say something, then wadded in after her. Sienna squinted after her. She continued to do so long after the portal had closed. Something was afoot there, but try as she might, she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Nah, was probably nothing. If she had something to say, she'd speak her mind sooner or later. Naruto blew out a breath. Finally, some peace and quiet. Sienna took the moment to lean against him, ignoring Cinder's baleful glare. You're gonna win again, right? He scoffed. Hey now, who do you think I am? Cinder looked up at him. Invincible? That's what you are? Willow hid a laugh behind her hand. Dear girl, he's good, but not that good. I'll take the silence for now. It was not to be. The door creaked open again. For a moment, Sienna thought it was Ty and come down to check on them again. A touching display. Nope, not him. Certainly not. She shouldn't have been surprised to see Colgrim leaning through the door. Greasy man, stupid man. What was he thinking coming down here? With guards? No less. Did he have a death wish? No, stupid question. He was lunatic. Cultist, of course he did. Naruto grinned. Wasn't a nice smile that? Less so as he shooed them off his lap. What do you want? Merely to speak with you, false one. Colgrim's smirk was pure grease, despite the Titan towering over him. Your friends and family remain safe in the stands, of course. As for your bride-to-be, I had a thought. Two fingers toyed with his beard, doing nothing to hide the dark look on his face. We feel it best if she remains in the main booth with me. It wouldn't do for an accident to transpire. After all, she is with child. Sienna's world went red. Why, you rotten little... Willow snapped her fingers before anyone could act. The poor duo with Colgrim became pillars of ice that shattered to nothingness before his very eyes. I'm sorry, did you say something about being vulnerable? She batted along, lashing at him. Please continue. He managed eloquently. Dad's hand caught Colgrim's wrist before he could escape. Hey now, just 'cause we're playing your little game, don't assume I'm gonna let you have your way. His hand tightened, drawing an ominous creak from his arm as the man struggled in his grasp. You threatened them, and I might just take my chances. I may not be able to kill you right now, but I'm not above crippling you. Sienna was pleased to see the color drain from the fool's face. Cinder shivered a little behind him. She wasn't surprised when she tried to emulate his methods. Such a daddy's girl. She glared at Colgrim. Touch her, and I'll flash fry you, your family, and anyone who ever shook your hands. Cinder, no. That shook his head before she could act. Your anger is exactly what he wants. She gnawed her teeth. Then maybe I should give it to him. Such darkness in you, little one. The lunatic leered at her for that, heedless of his own peril. Fascinating. He looked like he wanted to make a grab for her, but thought better of it when faced with their combined glare. You would make a fine champion for a goddess. If only you let go. Sienna reached for her whip at him. I'll show you letting go. You would, wouldn't you, child? Those hideous white eyes snapped at her, rooting her where she sat. You have anger too. You have hate, but you don't use them. Still, he prodded her. Why limit yourself? A splendid pillar of ice erupted from the ground and spread Colgrim in the and speared Colgrim in the groin. The man crumbled with the wheeze. Oops! Willow lowered her right hand, fingers still glimmering from frost. How clumsy of me! Sienna sniggered into her hand. Colgrim's face turned red. You whore! I'll take your hand for... Someone absolutely hissed. Enough! A pang of familiar dread hit Sienna like a brick as she recognized the voice. Don't you dare lay a hand on my mom and dad! The temperature spiked. Tongues of smoky flame licked up at the walls. You invited us here, didn't you? To your island to have a discussion. Is this what you call a discussion? Colgrim tried to speak. Instead, he gurgled and choked. Terror writ itself across his face. It's painful, isn't it? Through voice cooed. Not being able to breathe. Fire sucks the air right out of the room, you know. Cinder, Willow found her voice first as she rounded on their daughter. Get your semblance under control. You're suffocating him. Control your emotions. Her head tilted just so. How am I supposed to? Now to try to touch her, only to recall. Her shoulder was blazing hot, like you always do. How? She looked at him at last, face gone eerily blank, much like the glass she could create. How am I supposed to quell my rage towards a man who wants to execute my mother, my father, and my unborn sister? A hand curled into a fist at her side, nails biting down hard enough to draw blood. My aunts, my uncles, my everything. If you keep going, you'll kill him. You won't be able to take that back. Why would I want to? Those blazing golden eyes swept back to the ringleader. He was ready to kill Mom. I'm sure he was ready to risk his own life too. He grabbed at her. If he dies, the bombs go off. Slowly, the words registered with her. The heat fizzled in her eyes. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Colgrim stumbled towards the exit and gaping like a fish. You'll die for this, all of you. I'll see to myself once this is over. Naruto blew out a sigh. A golden claw flicked forward, grabbed the man's wrist first, twisted it hard. His reward was a shriek of pain. Then Colgrim was gone, stumbling away up a staircase. He didn't return. Just as well if he had. Sienna wasn't sure he wouldn't. I wanted to kill him. Cinder blinked down at her hands, startled. I wanted it so badly. Teary golden eyes gazed out at them. What's happening to me? Naruto knelt and pulled her into an embrace. Willow joined in on the left side. Sienna squirmed into it. Together they held her. Something was off. Robin felt it in his bones, a strange humming sensation that he'd learned to notice over the years. He'd grown rather adept at reading other people, a skill he'd honed in the streets since his earliest days. Some might say it was his semblance. If so, it might be a useful one, but he disagreed. It just didn't feel like it. Surely his semblance, whenever he managed to unlock the bloody thing, would be amazing. Like laser eyes or frost breath, maybe the ability to turn invincible or walk through walls. Invincibility, maybe. Whatever it was, he was sure it would be incredible. Down with the Schnee! Right, getting off track. Because right now, the crowd was giving off in all kinds of bad vibes. Maybe Colgrim had moved the Schnee sympathizers out, or perhaps they had sought the shelter after the last bout. Regardless, he didn't see a single dissenting face among them, only eager grins and less than pleasant chants. All things considered, all of them bayed for blood to a man. The adults had lost their levity and turned to talking amongst themselves, so he flicked a glance Cinder's way. You feeling this? She gritted her teeth. Yes, something's wrong. She touched a hand to her forehead. I'm angrier than I should be, like my emotions are beyond my control. Tell me about it. Sienna's ears were laid low against her hair. It's like an awful ringing in my brain. On that much, they agreed. They'd gone downstairs with the missus to check on the boss, only to come back quiet and pensive. He didn't like it. Was someone stirring everyone up with semblance? He shook off the strange feeling and directed his eyes to the arena. A slender figure stalked out to meet the boss, wearing robes black as night. Could have been a man, might have been a woman. Impossible to tell under that heavy cloak, clad in matte black from head to toe. They made nothing. They gave nothing away. That awful mask didn't help. Unlike the others, this one hid her face completely. Not a mask at all Roman realized, but some hideous helm. Carved in the ghastly likeness of some eldritch beast he didn't recognize. It looked every bit as terrifying as the figure before him. What was that thing supposed to be? A serpent? A dragon? Run! A voice stabbed at the back of his head and drawing a wince from him. He needs to run. Now. The hell? A gong rang out high above them. Colgrim wheezed out of breath, one hand favoring his thoroughly abused groin, the other hanging limp at his side. Let the second round commence! Now to blurt, rather than retreat, the masked figure met him head-on, catching his wrist in one palm, then the other with their free hand. Roman thought he caught a flicker of surprise in the blonde's face just now. He gazed deeply into the calm warrior's face, as though searching for something in those empty eye sockets. Whatever he saw there had him leaping back with a start. "Hell are you?" He barely heard the words. The masked warrior didn't answer. They blurred just as he had. "They stopped him." Raven frowned. "I haven't seen anyone do that, not even..." Oh shit! Naruto's head snapped back as the masked figure drove a heel palm into his chin. He didn't panic, only paused, wiped the thin line of blood from his mouth, and surged back in. The masked madman tried to catch him again, but paid dearly for it. This time, he fainted, leaving them overextended, and swept their legs. They crashed down into the dirt as he walked past. A boot crashed into their ribs and launched them across the arena. The crowd cast a sear of jeers his way, and Roman felt his stomach once unclenched. Right, nothing to worry about. "Come on, big guy, you've got this." Wait, they were getting up? How the hell were they getting back up? "Is this all you're capable of?" The warrior's word rang out, low and distorted, behind their dreaded helm. "I was led to believe you were a capable fighter." A hand reached behind their back, drawing a wicked-looking sword out of its sheath. They brandished it at him, turning it in the air as one might some giant key in blanket mockery. "Have I been misled?" The boss blew out a low breath. "Careful what you wish for." He flickered. A bolt of lightning split the clear sky, caught him halfway, and smote him mid-step. He fell to a knee as every muscle in his body clamped down. The masked warrior raised his hands with a war cry and brought another bolt crashing down before he could rise again. Another! Summer cried out. "No!" The masked fighter slammed forward and drove a fist into the boss's smoldered chest. He hurled back with an awful crack into the arena well. "Shit!" Roman heard Raven swore softly behind him. I thought something was suspicious." She stabbed a finger towards the masked warrior, who even now threw the cloak aside. Faint flecks of wild flame shone bright through the slits of the helm. "They've got a maiden, and a powerful one at that." Summer's oath proved far more imaginative. "Which one is it? Spring, summer, fall? Does it matter?" Tying up his arms. "We need to get down there." Willow winced. "But he can handle my powers easily. Why?" "You've only just got a grasp on your gifts recently." She flinched as another bolt of lightning hurtled past, forcing the blonde to dodge, only for a cluster of ice to root his feet where he stood. Guarding against any bolt of lightning did him little good, driving him to his knees anew. "This one looks like she's had her powers for years, if not decades." Crow burst upright. "We need to help." Willow held a hand. "No." He ran on her. "What do you mean, no?" What do you fear, Schnee?" The masked figure stalked forward, reached down, and grabbed the boss by the face. "Let me see." "That's an awful monologue." Naruto spat blood and laughed. "I fear an awful lot of things." As they looked on, he held up his good hand, fingers splayed, and began to count down. "Ghost, vegetables, the kid's on a sugar rush, Willow when she hasn't had her coffee, Summer lusting after my arm." The huntress in question squeaked. His opponents did not. "Why can't you take this seriously?" "Because," he threw his head back and spat in her face, "that's what you want, and I'm not going to give it to you, but I will give you this. You're making him angry. Go on, keep poking me. It tickles." The woman grabbed his neck and drove her blade deep into his stomach. Naruto didn't even try to fight her. He accepted the blade with a smile, uncaring as she sheathed it in his stomach. Blood bubbled up between his lips. And still, that smile never faded not. "Stop!" Summer bowled her way forward, only for Willow to reel her back. "You're killing him! Stop it!" Her eyes blazed with hate and shone with tears. "I said stop!" A cry of pain went up and warped into low laughter. Willow palmed her face. "They've done it now." Roman blinked. "Done what? I don't get it." He switched, Cinder murmured. Sienna nodded with her. Summer snarled. "Switched with who?" "Watch." Naruto's face exploded upward, trailing features of red light. Unprepared, the woman took his punch square in the ribs. An awful crack pervaded the arena. The woman rocketed backwards, struck the ground once, bounced, and careened into a wall. To her credit, she recovered quickly, ripped herself free, and clutched her injured side. "What is this, Schnee?" A clawed finger wagged her away. "He's not here right now." Her hand snapped out, flinging a bolt of ebony light his way. "What are you on about?" He batted the lightning away with ease. It arced into the stands and annihilated a cluster of zealots. "An inferior creature like you wouldn't understand." the boss rasped as he climbed to his feet. "Still, you have my thanks." His voice was different than Roman remembered. Deeper somehow, darker, baleful red eyes bearing cat-like slits regarding the woman opposite them. "Been a while since we were hit with anything resemblance of proper genjutsu." A clawed hand reached down, patting his wound. "An emotion-based semblance amplified by Maiden's powers. A truly dangerous combination. You've my respect for that, if nothing else. Unfortunately for you." His hand flicked out towards her, clawed fingers reaching, grasping for nothing. You've made me angry, child." Roman didn't see him move. One moment he stood opposite the woman, Maiden, grinning like a brute. In the next, he had her face in his hands, hoisting her into the air. From there, he began to squeeze. She beat fiercely at his chest with both fists, lashing at him with wind and fire and ice and every element she could bring to bear. He weathered it all and smiled. What meager wounds she inflicted healed faster than she could create them, and still those blazing red eyes gleamed upon her, narrowed now. "I've just had the most wonderful idea." A casual flick of the wrist lopped off her right arm neatly at the elbow, drawing a truncated cry of pain from his victim as her limb sailed away into the air. From there, he took hold of the masked woman's head and turned her towards the stance. No, towards them. She kicked out at him fiercely, thrashed like a wildcat. "You wouldn't dare!" Colgram must have had some inkling too, because he bowled forward, nearly flinging himself out of the booth to get to them. "Release the envy of our goddess at once!" Naruto craned his neck up at him. "And if I don't?" The lunatic hefted a detonator in his hand. "Then you won't leave this island alive. I'll blow us all sky high, right here, right now." Shit, the bombs. He'd almost forgotten. Hopefully the boss would listen. He didn't much fancy the idea of dying in a cloud of fiery napalm. Whoever this lady was, she wasn't worth it. Laughter turned his hopes to ash. "You threaten me with death?" The entity who was and was not Naruto tilted his head, still gripping his prey. "You don't seem to understand the situation that you're in, little man." His fingers tightened around the woman's throat. "I stopped fearing death a long time ago. No, what I fear these days are monsters." His hand twisted without warning. An awful crack pervaded the room. Her body slumped. "Because at the end of the day, I am one." Light burst from the dead woman's body. In the same instant, Cinder crashed down to a knee beside Roman. She grabbed at his shoulder for balance as she went, unintentionally tearing him clean out of his seat. Panic bleated through his brain. No. They'd go right over the side, or it was all well and good, but he didn't fancy a fall from his height. His fingers flailed for purchase on a nearby guardrail, caught it, and managed to ride them both at the last second. "Oi, Cinder, you all right there?" She gripped her skull with a groan. "Head hurts." "Yeah, I'm sure. Open your eyes." He held a hand before her face. "Tell me how many fingers you see." When she raised her eyes, they smoldered with a flickering flame. "Two." He heard Willow's gasp, and suddenly she was there, nudging him aside to take the dazed girl's face between her hands. Roman didn't hear the words that passed between mother and daughter, but the Schnee must have seen the fire there too, because her expression crumpled into absolute misery. A tug, and she pulled her daughter into her bosom. "Oh, Cinder, I never wanted this life for you." Wait. Summer skidded to a stop beside them. "Does this mean she's—" Roman didn't know much about Maiden, jack all really, but he figured their concern was a bad thing. That can't be good. "Enough!" Golgrim howled as a knife through his thoughts. "All of you, die for the glory of our goddess!" The detonator clicked. Once, twice, thrice. Now, nothing happened. Roman lowered his arm, trying to rationalize this. A faulty trigger, maybe? No, that was bad luck on a completely different scale. Golgrim continued to howl imprecations as he slammed his thumb against the stopper, cursing it. The men and women around him, everyone, everything. The faint sound of empty clicks filled the arena. All eyes fell upon him. Nothing happened, and with each passing second, well, one had but to look. Kallinger glared golden daggers at Colgrim's booth, and the frantic man within. Naruto eyes blue once more, flexed his fingers, conjuring a keening sphere already in his hand. Willow drew herself up with a snarl. Crow reached for Harbinger, even as the rest of Team Stark went for their weapons. Sienna drew her whip for a single blessed moment. Nobody else moved. No one breathed, blinked, nary a soul, until Naruto snarled, "Get him!" And all hell broke loose. Previous, Colgrim howled. I will not die here. My goddess shields me. She shan't let me. Raven slammed a heel into his chest and sent him crashing through a tree. Shut up. There are no gods here. Only monsters. Sal! The masked the faunus looked up into the sky, frowning now as a faint whistling noise reached his ears. His comrades frowned with him. The hell is that? You! Was it a bird? A plane? No, it was too damn high up. Tations! His eyes widened behind the mask. Oh, fuck me. The last thing he saw was green eyes and long, glowing red hair. Then the earth erupted. Good evening, children. A familiar voice cooed behind her. Your parents sent me to retrieve you. My, what a mess you've made. Well, looks like we've got us a volunteer, boys. 100 lien to the maggot who blows his bloody brains out. Someone fired at the newcomer. He deflected the shot with his chitinous tail, twisting his head around and giggled. Gentlemen, that's no way to treat a guest. Someone else swore. Fuck me, that's Tyrion Kalos. You know my name! What fun! The madman clapped his hands. He was still clapping when a pair of wicked knives came flying out each of his sleeves. I believe it is my turn now. A single leap and he was among them. You will die here, today, you and your children. Willow drew herself upright, eyes flashing like ice. She said nothing, did nothing. Her eyes blazed with cold blue flames. No last words? Her lips quirked in a small smile. I can't think of one. No, two actually. Thank you. A pause. What? You like to hear yourself talk, don't you? She gripped her shoulder and popped it back into place. To monologue, most villains do. Talk. Naruto was right about that much. The wind picked up around them, a faint keening sound rising from with it. Your kind just love to hear the sound of your voice. And you gave me all the time I needed. Then the world became a blizzard. I'll kill you. Do you hear me? You and your little horse. Did you hear what he just said? Naruto inhaled deeply. Get him. The gun clicked empty. Why won't you die? I don't care how bloody my hands get, so long as hers remain clean. Does that make me a hypocrite? Perhaps. Unfortunately, it also makes you a dead man. End of chapter 23.